All right, I know this episode has been a long time coming uh, because, for one thing, we sold our house and moved. So I have been distracted and working on other stuff too. For example, the beauty series, Finding Beauty in the New York Times. But at any rate, let's talk about one of the greatest Americans who ever lived, I think, and an astonishing person, Cesar Chavez, leader or co-leader of the United Farm Workers. He was a huge hero of my parents, including my conscientious objector and pacifist stepfather, Richard. And in some sense, although, I grew up in D.C., pretty far from the California fields, it just seems so present. The Great Boycott, the lettuce boycott, and the story of the farm workers and what they were doing and how badly they had been exploited. And it seemed central to the civil rights movement at a certain moment, I guess you'd say. And my parents just unqualifiedly admired Cesar Chavez. And I'm reading this book. This is my source. And also, this is another reason why this took a while, because this is a big, thick book, and I really wanted to read the whole thing, because this is a wonderful book by Jacques Levy. And it's a oral autobiography in which Chavez tells his whole story, but then many other people tell parts of the story too, confirm it or even question it. Dolores Huerta, his co-leader of the farm workers, is critical of him at several spots. Talks about how badly they struggled and how badly they fought each other, which I found surprising. And but it's not surprising, right? Because these are hard things to do. The degree of commitment that they brought, both of them, Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, it's almost incomprehensible. Chavez came from straight up real farm working people, all right? Actually, born and raised in Yuma, Arizona. The family had a ranch and they were forced out in a sort of, as he portrays it, ethnic cleansing series of events. And ended up, living with many children, in cars and stuff as they picked the fields in California, along with Okies and stuff like this, a hard time. It's just, he's so matter-of-fact about describing that, but let's try to imagine what that's like, okay? You're a migrant farm worker living in a station wagon that you can't afford to gas up with your 8 children. Making zilch, moving from crop to crop and valley to valley through California. Well, Cesar Chavez did something real about that, right? He made a union, and he fought for it for decades. Now, he was as committed to nonviolence as anyone we've talked about, and also, among all the people we talked about, he's among the most creative applier of nonviolence. He constantly says that nonviolence calls for creativity. And it's not that he invented the boycott, for example, or the hunger strike, right? But he mobilized the whole country there. Some of these other figures have done stuff like this. Okay, Lucretia Mott was active in movements to boycott slave goods, for instance. Okay, it's not that consumer boycotts had never been tried. I think that the Great Boycott, though, was effective. It changed the bottom line, right? But he's doing myriad nonviolent actions, constantly conceiving new nonviolent approaches to protest and to effectively getting better conditions for real people, man. So I just, there's infinitely much to say and infinitely much to admire about Cesar Chavez and his movement. And I don't want to just say that's his movement, actually. I mean, the people who did that movement. It's one of the most important moments in American history in lots of ways, I think, okay, and one of the most admirable. But I just thought I would read bits of, like, sort of chapters 7 and 8 in the middle of this book as he's gearing up for the Great Boycott, and also his own hunger strikes, his own fasts. He talks about the power of marches. One thing is he has a religious oomph to all this. So a march, like sort of marching with people across much of California to protest conditions of farm workers, a march, he says, is a pilgrimage. Right? He doesn't use the word hunger strike. He says it's a fast. Right? He didn't even want it public that he was starving himself and stuff. I mean, we'll discuss why a little bit. I guess Gandhi did stuff like that as well, like sort of personally, almost like embodying the burden of the world and then taking the most practical and decent steps to ameliorate the problems that one comes to be, like taking on the pain. I mean, it's the kind of thing where I don't know how someone gets to be like that, okay? So this is what he says. This is about the Great Boycott. This is in the late 60s, early 70s. To us, the boycott of grapes was the most near perfect of nonviolent struggles, because nonviolence also requires mass involvement. The boycott demonstrated to the whole country, the whole world, what people can do by nonviolent action. I'm out here outside of Boulder, Colorado, right now, visiting my new grandbaby, Louisa, and her parents, Emma and Chris. Nonviolence in the abstract is a very difficult thing to comprehend or explain. I'd read a lot, but all of it was in the abstract. It's difficult to carry the message to people who aren't involved. Nonviolence must be explained in context. People equate nonviolence with inaction, with not doing anything, and it's not that at all. It's exactly the opposite. And of course, a number of figures have said just that, right? Like, this is not passive non-resistance. Now, this is interesting. Chavez goes directly at the Martin Luther King Malcolm X debate and just clearly sides with King. Of course he does, and of course King admired Cesar Chavez and vice versa. In his autobiography, Malcolm X said, "I believe it's a crime." This is a quote. "I believe it's a crime for anyone who is being brutalized to continue to accept that brutality without doing something to defend himself." Nonviolence versus self-defense is the way the Martin Malcolm debate got framed. If that's how Christian philosophy is interpreted, if that's what Gandhian philosophy teaches, well then I will call them criminal philosophies. If they teach nonviolent, non-resistance, Malcolm X will call them criminal, because they're preventing liberation from happening. But Gandhi never said not to do anything. He said exactly the opposite. He said, do something. Offer your life. Cesar certainly did that. He said, if you really want to do something, be willing to die for it. I guess when you get right down to it, I think if there is an American Gandhi, it is Chavez. Lots of people have been called American Gandhis. Often only talk results when a person with social concern wants to do something for the underdog non-violently. Often only talk results. But just talking about change is not going to bring it about. Talk just gives people an out. Generally what happens is that people will study nonviolence, read books, go to seminars where they discuss nonviolence and attend endless meetings. In most cases, they find some satisfaction in this and think somehow they are accomplishing something, but all the while and right across town, the pot is brewing. Bad shit is happening. Oppression continues. And I mean, I have to say, like, I feel myself to be accused here too. I have a very abstract engagement with pacifism, of course, and you can see that. I mean, but that's also just who I am. Like, I'm an intellectual, right? So I'm interested in the intellectual history, the basic positions, and all that. Reading is not bad, but thinking they made a great accomplishment. But thinking they made a great accomplishment is bad. They're kidding themselves. These people can't be effective. Nonviolence becomes just an ideology, something to write about, or read about, or talk about, while still being very comfortable. The ideology becomes a luxury, not a way of life. And nothing can be changed while being comfortable. Life is not made that way. The whole essence of nonviolent action is getting a lot of people involved, vast numbers doing little things. And that was his approach to nonviolent resistance. Not like going limp when the cops come, but getting a lot of people involved, vast numbers, each doing little things. It's difficult to get people involved in a picket line because it takes their time. But anytime a person can be persuaded not to eat a grape, and we persuaded millions not to eat grapes, and I'm testifying this, man, it went across the country. That's involvement. That's the most direct action. And it's set up in such a way that everybody can participate. So this grape boycott really had a kind of genius of nonviolence. It's very direct, very straightforward, and very effective. And everyone can participate by doing something real, not just yapping. Nonviolence also has one big demand: the need to be creative, to develop strategy. Gandhi described it as moral jujitsu. And Chavez quotes that several times. Moral jujitsu, nonviolent resistance. Always hit the opposition off balance and keep your principles. Some great nonviolent successes have been achieved in history. Moses is about the best example. I hadn't heard that before. They escaped, right? Now, did Moses drown the Egyptian army, though, by his own decree, or was that God's doing? I mean, the Old Testament is not exactly a pacifist classic, but he does say Moses. Christ also is a beautiful example, as is the way the Christians overcame tyranny. They needed 300 years, but they did it. The most recent example is Gandhi. To me, that's the most beautiful one. While the philosophy of nonviolence covers physical, verbal, and moral behavior, we haven't achieved the goal of universal nonviolence. If we can't achieve it, we're saints, and we're not. We're still working on eliminating physical violence, though that isn't all by any stretch of the imagination. After workers began to understand physical nonviolence among people, then we also apply it to property and go on from there. All right, now, I had remembered that Cesar Chavez engaged in hunger strikes, or as he says, fasts, religious spiritual fasts, religious fasts. But I didn't remember exactly the reason. I mean, I figured it's, of course, to protest the exploitation of farm workers by big growers and stuff, or agro-industry. But the reason for the fast in which he almost died, really, was to prevent his own movement from becoming violent. He was protesting, he was thinking, he saw signs, this is around 1970, he saw signs that the farm workers were becoming so frustrated and so exploited that they would resort to violence. And he saw some moments of violence in the resistance. And the frustration of the movement that he led had to be immense. Like, it didn't create instant transformation, for sure. Sometimes it probably seemed like it wasn't working. So he went on a hunger strike, not because that was going to impress, Ronald Reagan, the governor of California or something, but because that would impress his own people who cared about him and stuff like this, and have been led by him. And he was protesting the emergence of violent resistance in his own movement. That's a unique moment, too, I think, in these histories. He says this, this is chapter 8, the miracle of the fast. He really thinks this was a transformative moment for the movement. There was a demoralization in the ranks, people becoming desperate, more and more talk about violence. People meant it, even when they talked to me. They would say, hey, we've got to burn these sons of bitches down. We've got to kill a few of them. Several packing sheds had been burned. We had a very narrow escape. One of our guys was run over by a truck. The people there wanted to do the truck driver in. I even had to confiscate a few guns off the picket line. That sounds like a hard job to me, confiscating people's guns on a picket line. So that's what led to his own crisis. He thought that his own movement was becoming violent. I thought I had to bring the movement to a halt, to do something that would force them and me to deal with the whole question of violence and ourselves. We had to stop long enough to take account of what we were doing. We had to stop the movement long enough to reflect. And that's why he stopped eating. So I stopped eating. It was a Thursday. Then I didn't eat on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. After 4 days, I called a meeting of all the strikers and staff, they were on strike already, at Filipino Hall to announce what I was doing. I just made a short speech. I told them I thought they were discouraged because they were talking about shortcuts, about violence. They were getting so mad with the growers, they couldn't be effective anymore. Then I talked about violence. How could they oppose violence of the War of Vietnam, I asked, but proposed to use violence for our cause? When the civil rights movement turned to violence, I said, it was the blacks who suffered, who were killed, who had their homes burned. If we turned to violence, it would be the poor who would suffer. Then I said I was going to stop eating until such time as everyone in the strike either ignored me or made up their minds that they were not going to be committing violence. I didn't wait for reactions. I just walked out of Filipino Hall and headed for the co-op building at the 40 acres. They did all kinds of things, you know. People tried to intervene. At one point, some of his associates hired someone to go and try to force feed Cesar Chavez. They thought that he was the movement. You know, autobiography of La Causa. And they loved him too. I get that vibe here and there. So they couldn't stand the idea that he was going to starve himself to death, okay? And they didn't think that helped anybody. But he thinks it did. He thinks this was the ultimate turning point that led to the success of the movement. I'm not sure what to say about these things, but I do know that, you know, his commitment, again, like to taking on board the suffering of the people whose interests he is representing, is truly amazing. I mean, he contrasts in all these ways with all the union leaders he was dealing with. See, I mean, one big theme of this thing is that the Teamsters Union and others, but especially the Teamsters, tried to organize farm workers on behalf of the growers, really. And I mean, they naturally organized the truck industry around growing and, you know, packing and shipping. But maybe the government and certainly the growers tried to use the Teamsters Union to short circuit and destroy and make impossible the United Farm Workers, and to create a union representation of the farm workers that would not effectively defend their interests. Okay, so he's fighting the Teamsters, all right? And the Teamsters are threatening violence at any given moment, right? Like these are big, beefy truck driver dudes, and he describes a lot of this stuff. The mafia-oriented enforcers and shit that are working for the Teamsters. He's dealing with Jimmy Hoffa, even to some extent, indirectly perhaps, and it's a world in which violence is endemic. It's got race and class and, going to the max, all right? And it's got people all around who are willing to use violence, including Reagan and definitely the Teamsters. And lots of people in his movement are saying, look, I mean, we're going to get erased if we don't play the game as it is, as the rules are set, which is like, you do an act of violence and we respond double, okay? Right? Because that's the only way we're going to win this thing in the long run. Cesar Chavez remade his own movement at this juncture to make clear to everyone that this thing was committed to nonviolent resistance. Chavez does do what lots of these folks do, which is a little bit try to have it both ways. That these tactics are the most effective tactics of resistance, and they're also completely morally required, maybe by God, right? So we promise that if you do this very moral thing or whatever, you will actually win. Now, for Chavez, I think that had very Christian flavor, Catholic flavor, right? Like that, because this is what God wants. If we want to be on God's side, then we have to do God's work, and that means no violence, right? But okay, so he's the best example, though, of this combination of the spiritual power of the appeal of nonviolence and the practical effect of creative, nonviolent tactics. I mean, somehow this country produced Cesar Chavez, and there must be something good about it, I'd say, even though it's also the country that tried to destroy Cesar Chavez in 17 different ways. All right, well, I'm glad to be going back to producing some episodes here, and I might do one. Let's see what got a couple ideas. Gene Sharp, and maybe some contemporary leaders. All right, that's that episode. Glad to do another one.